Yes, good afternoon, good morning. We are joined together to discuss week 24 of our Bible reading. We are covering the dates June 11 through June 17, at least by my calculations. And this is, again, a fairly diverse reading. We have 2 Chronicles 21, verse 19 through 2 Chronicles 25. We have some passages from 2 Kings chapter 8 through 2 Kings chapter 14. And we have the illustrious story of Jonah, part of Hosea, and Joel. And here's the truth of the matter. We are now reading about, in our previous week's reading, we read a lot about the failings of the kingdom of Israel, their failure to follow God. And now we're seeing the southern tribes of Judah drifting away. And we're at about 840 BC. So we're 600 years in round numbers since the entire nation of Israel was formed at Mount Sinai. And again, remember, the northern kingdom is consisting of 10 tribes. The southern kingdom consists of Judah, and the southern kingdom is called Judah. It's not called anything else. So it is Judah, but it includes Benjamin. And I think I may have mentioned this before. I know one of our fellow readers brought it to my attention. How did Simeon, which is completely surrounded, according to all the records we have, within Judah, how did it not be part of Judah? I can't answer that. Are there really 10 tribes? Is Simeon really up there in Israel? I don't know. I can't tell you. Now, recall as well that many of the Aaronic priests, and we were just discussing pronunciation, so would that perhaps be Aaronic, meaning a glottal stop between the two A's? The Aaronic priests and the Levites, many of them left the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, and moved to Judah, because only there was it convenient to go to Jerusalem to worship in the temple, in the tabernacle. Actually, which is Solomon's temple at this point. So that kind of accelerated the drift away in Israel. So that's why at this point, Israel is pretty well gone from God's word, whereas Judah is still somewhat following. And as a result of that, remember, most of Elijah's ministry and much of Elisha's ministry was in the northern kingdom of Israel because they were drifting away faster than Judah. Now, here's an interesting thing in this week's reading. It says in 2 Chronicles 21, 12 through 15, that Elijah wrote a prophetic letter to Jehoram after Elisha had been anointed to replace Elijah. And it almost sounds like it was after Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind. I'll allow you to think about what that might mean. I really don't know, but it is credited to Elijah, and it was received by Jehoram. Elisha, at roughly this point in our reading, meets with Hazael in Damascus. Now, why he went to Damascus to prophesy to Hazael, not too clear to me. I mean, obviously he was directed by God. He prophesies that Hazael will become king of Aram, which he does, because once he hears this prophecy, Hazael fulfills the prophecy by murdering the current king, Ben-Hadad. So what can we say? Sometimes writing it down is a self-fulfilling prophecy. However, there is an encouraging bit of history in our reading, the story of Joash. Now, it starts miserably, but it ends reasonably well. So, during our reading, Athaliah was the mother of King Ahaziah, the king of Judah. And she viewed herself as the queen of Judah. And after her son died, she more or less declared herself the queen of Judah. And we are told that she is from the line of King Omri of Israel. And that means to me that she is one of the line of Ahab. And our editor said, now I could not demonstrate this, but our editor says that she is Jezebel's daughter. So, wow, there's a heritage for you. Because recall, Jezebel was even more evil than Ahab. So it's an amazing achievement to be her daughter and be evil as well. So to guarantee that she remains the queen, to guarantee, because she now sees herself as the queen of Judah since her son, who was the king, has died, Athaliah tries to kill all potential heirs to the throne of Judah. Now note, that would of necessity include her own children. So I don't know what to say about that except evil prevails. Now, Jehoram's daughter, who was the king of Judah before Ahaziah became the king, his daughter saves one of the children, Joash. Now, this is a child. This is either a nursing child or a child less than 2 years old. So the daughter of Jehoram has saved one of the children and handed it over to the priests. And that child, Joash, is raised by the priests. Apparently in the temple is what it appears to me. He's kept safe in the temple until he's 6 years old. After 6 years, Jehoiada, the priest, who knows of his origin, has him revealed to the nation, and he is anointed king. So now we have a king in the kingly line, not in Ahab's line, and Joash is trained and directed by Jehoiada for many years, and faithfulness in Judah is strongly encouraged by this development. And Joash, during the early part of his reign, was very much trying to follow God's plan. And note that during this time, a prophecy by Joel about locusts is quoted by Peter on Pentecost. So I'd like to read that passage from our text. This is Joel 2, verses 28 through 32. Our editor refers to this as the promise of God's Spirit. And afterward, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my Spirit in those days. I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved, for on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be deliverance, as the Lord has said, among the survivors whom the Lord calls. Now note that that very first part of that passage was quoted by Peter when they were speaking in tongues on the day of Pentecost. So this is quite interesting. The passage obviously is looking forward to the beginning of the end times, which is after Christ's resurrection, but it's clearly looking way forward. If you look at the latter part of what we read, it's clearly looking way forward to what appears to me to be the end of time. So yes, we are certainly in the end times, but I don't think we've quite reached the end of time. Well, the very fact that we're having this discussion proves that. Anyway, sadly, Joash, after Jehoiada passes away and he doesn't have him as for guidance, later begins to accept Asherah poles and idols, and sadly, he murders Jehoiada's son, Zechariah, which is tragic beyond belief, the man who saved his life. So sin is arriving more and more heavily in Judah. Sad but true. But we also have the amazing story in our reading of Jonah, who is summoned by God not to preach to Israel, not to preach to Judah. No, no, no. You, Jonah, are to go preach in Nineveh. You're going to go preach to the enemy that they are sinning and they need to follow God. And Jonah thinks, what? I don't think I want to do that. Go preach to the Ninevites? No, no. Well, you pretty well know the story. We've had a play about it. We've had songs about it. So Jonah boards a ship, apparently to go to Tarshish, which I believe is Spain, although there is also a reference to Tarshish on Cyprus. So I don't know for sure, but I think he was trying to get a long ways away, where he figured maybe God wouldn't find him. Really? I don't know. But nonetheless, a great storm comes up and they cast lots, and the lot falls on Jonah, and they say, well, what have you done that's making us have this terrible storm? What, have you defied God? And he said, well, I am fleeing from God. The only thing you can do is heave me over the side. I'm the cause. I'm sorry. Boom. They resist, but finally they toss him in the ocean. And it says, a great fish swallows, or at least I'll just say a fish-like creature, swallows Jonah. We're out in the ocean. I don't know. I'd say we're south of Cyprus somewhere. We're out in the ocean. The great fish swallows Jonah. He's somehow still alive in the fish. I guess the fish must be air-breathing, so it had to be a whale or a whale shark. No, not a shark. It had to be something air-breathing, I would think. Nonetheless, whatever it is, he's alive in the fish, the whale, and he prays to God. And I would like to read that prayer on page 756 of my copy. This is Jonah 21, starting around verse 12. I'm sorry, around verse 8. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. But I, with a song of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. Salvation comes from the Lord. And as a result of the prayer, the large fish barfs up Jonah on the beach. I would say in Lebanon, that'd be my guess. I can't tell where he was exactly. And Jonah makes his way to Nineveh as directed by God, and he preaches to Nineveh. And we're told that the city's so big it would take 3 days to walk from one side to the other. And Jonah is preaching throughout the city, and his preaching is so successful that the whole city is mourning how evil they've been, and they turn and they repent. And Jonah then is aggravated because he knew God was going to be merciful. That's what he seems to say. And he sits to watch to see what's going to happen. And remember, God causes a vine to grow up to shade him because he's being barbecued out in the desert. And Jonah is so annoyed that all these Ninevites have turned back to God, or I doubt that they've turned to the true God, but they've at least turned away from some of their evil practices. And God explains to him, when he sends the worm to kill the vine, he says, Jonah, think about it. Don't you think that all those people are of more value to me than a vine growing up here? Come on, get right. These people have spirits and souls as well. So to me, this was a very powerful lesson that to me is paralleled in the story of God showing Peter the sheet coming down 3 times, and he says, take, kill, and eat. And basically God is explaining that all these people need his love, and they're all people that he would like to see saved. So we'll end our discussion today on what I think is that cheerful note. And we'll look forward to joining together again in week 25.